So in this video, I want to share with you a kind of a remedial carpentry job I'm doing. Back in 1986, we just bought the property here. I was 23, no buildings on it. I was living in a leaky tent. I really needed a place to stay, any kind of a place at all. And so I built myself the shed. That's what we call it. It's a 10 by 20 foot building. My wife and I lived in there 3 seasons of the year for, I don't know, until 1991, until the house was ready to move into. So I like the place. I like the old shed. The thing is, it was built really badly from the start. It was my first building, and I didn't have very many tools. I didn't have very much money. I had less experience, and living in that tent, I just wanted to get in someplace quickly. So I built this shed the best I could, and it's pretty bad. And here we are 30-something years later, and I'm working to preserve it. I'm trying to fix some problems. I want to show you the problems and the way I'm fixing them, and maybe you can learn something and apply it to fixing up old buildings at your place. This is the shed. I've already started on the remedial work, and essentially I'm doing several things. I'm doing my best to stabilize this with the best kind of foundation I can put under it at this stage. The only siding on this before was some 1x6 wood siding, and down at the bottom on one side in particular, it was rotting quite badly. Whole sections were gone. The rest of the siding was kind of thin, so I'm beefing up the solidity of the outside walls. I'm doing that actually with this plywood. I'll explain more about that later. And ultimately on top, between corner boards and around window trim, I'm going to be putting some cedar shingles. So I want this thing to last a long time, and I want it to look good too, look as good as it can. This is really kind of a homely shape even to begin with. I would never build a building with as shallow a roof slope and the proportions of walls I have here. But I guess this is really just an exercise in, trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, an old sow's ear too. So one of the fundamental problems with the shed was that we didn't build it with any sort of a frost-proof foundation. Now, where we live, frost penetration 2, 3, 4 feet every winter is normal, and the soil here is heavy, so it moves, and that's been a problem. That's one of the reasons why this shed has kind of sagged a bit and twisted, because we just laid down some limestone rocks on the ground. I dug in a tiny little bit, but we laid them in, and then we built the floor frame on top of that. So I didn't want to do any other fixing up work until I did my best to create a more stable footing, because this whole shed rests on beams and floor joists that I made from poplar logs that I cut in the forest. So poplar is not very rot resistant at all, and I wanted to get the shed to sit on something other than those rocks that are sitting underneath the frame, and that's what you see going on here now. This is some concrete that you see here, and there was some forming lumber in here. So what I did was I set down some forming lumber, and then I dug out the area as much as I could all along the length of the shed. It's still resting on some stones, but where I could, I wanted to get underneath and poured this concrete and used a concrete vibrator to have it flow underneath as much as possible. So this concrete is kind of under that poplar beam I was telling you about. Now, I don't really think that's going to last a long time. So what I did was, this plywood that's on the outside, this is 3/4 inch plywood, and it's pressure treated plywood, and it's screwed to the wall frame. So what I'm going for here is to make this shed capable of resting on its skin only, because this is pressure treated plywood, so it should last pretty well. There's also going to be a board here along the bottom. I'll show you what that looks like on the front of the shed. That's going to define the bottom edge of the shingles where they stop, and that particular board is pressure treated, but the kind used for a pressure treated wood foundation, so it never ever rots no matter how long it's in contact with the soil. It's just a permanent wood foundation kind of material. So that's also going to be bearing on this concrete here. That's why I had it stick out further. I'm going to be using some PL Premium construction adhesive to bond it to the plywood, and also screws, of course, and things. Even if the floor frame starts to rot away, the shed's still going to be as stable as it can be. Now, granted, this concrete's not below the frost line. It's almost certainly going to crack. But I figure if the shed has stayed here, more or less stable for 30 years, based on just some limestone rocks taken from the forest and put on the ground, then this is probably going to work quite a bit better. And also, to give this concrete every opportunity I could to work properly, I put in some polyester fibers. So this greatly reinforces the strength of the concrete, helps it to hold together. And as I said, I used a concrete vibrator to consolidate it and get it to flow in and do a good job. So that's thing number one, some kind of stable foundation. Another thing I'm doing here is installing these corner boards. These are pressure treated, just regular pressure treated. I know the bottom's down at the end, but I think it's going to last okay. As I mentioned before, cedar shingles will be installed on the walls, butting up against the corner board here. There's going to be a similar trim around the door and around the windows. The windows already had trim on them, and the trim is thicker than the 3/4 inch plywood, so it sticks out proud of the plywood, but that's not really an issue because I'm going to go over here with some more wood, like that 1.5 inch pressure treated, a little bit wider. Now there's going to be a gap between the bottom of that and the plywood, but that's okay. There's going to be a rain screen in here too, something that allows water to drain down and out of the wall if it gets past the shingles. So all of that taken together means that the thickness of shingles in the rain screen is about this much.
That's almost an inch, because we did it at my place.
It's almost an inch, exactly. So that's going to be covering up this gap, so there's no problem. This kind of a project requires a very different sort of thinking than regular from scratch carpentry, because when you're doing a new building, you want to do everything you can as well as you can, and if you do that successfully, errors don't add up. You just have a nice crisp building that could last forever. With something like this, you're always dealing with compromises. It's constant compromises. I think a lot of people would have knocked this building down. Sentimental value, and also the fact that it's really doing a good job for us. I mean, the roof is excellent. I replaced the shingles a couple years ago. This shed is a regular part of our life, so I think it's worth fixing, and that's what we're going to do. But I want to tell you something now about a mistake that I made way back in '86 that's still haunting me now. I don't suppose anybody makes it very far through life before realizing that sometimes little mistakes, little misunderstandings can have long-term consequences, and that's what's going on here. When I built this shed, as I said, 23 years old, never built anything substantial before, I didn't realize that you use a level to make walls plumb. I mean, I had built plenty of furniture before this, and when I want to make something square, I use a square. So I had the floor built, and I used my carpenter's square while I was single-handedly trying to hold the wall up and get it plumb and lock it in position. But of course, there's two problems with that. I mean, I'm just one guy, so I'm not going to get it very accurate. And even if it was accurate, the floor might not be perfectly level, and also a little bit of error on a 2-foot level makes a big difference on an 8-foot wall.
So just to clarify here, you're telling us that you plumbed the wall frame with a square.
That's right. That's what I did, because I didn't know any better. And so I'm kind of proud of myself, not really noticing not really noticing it's way out of square. And my old neighbor, Ivan Bailey, comes over. He would have been in his 70s at the time, and he walks over, looks at the building, and he says, "Whoa, that looks really out of plumb. Can I have your level?" And well, I owned a level. I used it to level up the floor. And as soon as he said, "Can I have your level?" I thought to myself, that's a much better way to plumb a wall than a square. And so he put it on, and sure enough, it was out of whack. But I was far enough along. I'd already put on the braces and inside to stabilize the frame, and so basically I locked it in the unplumb position. And once I knew it was unplumb, it was really bugging me. I'd look at it many times a day and thinking, what should I do? Should I knock it down? Should I start again? And kicking myself. And anyway, I lived with it, and those sort of regrets, they wear off after a while. But anyway, in the interests of full disclosure, this is how out of plumb it is. So this is a 4-foot level. And when I get this thing plumb
there.
Yeah, the bubble's plumb. Look at how far off that wall is on a 4 foot length. What is that?
Yeah.
That's almost 2.5 inches.
I'm having trouble holding the camera steady. It's so appalling.
Well, it is appalling, but you know, it doesn't move. It's solid. As I said, I have diagonal braces inside. I've certainly locked it into position now by applying all this plywood. And, you know, that's just the way the wonky old shed is. It's just crooked. And
It's got character.
it does have character.
In the same way that an arthritic old man has character.
Right, okay, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. But, so what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you this in a subsequent video, is I'm going to do the same thing I did with the siding, because when Ivan came over, the frame was locked and solid, but I hadn't put on the siding yet. And he said, well, you know, we should at least make the siding level. So the courses of shingles will be level. And, you know, the door is going to have to be a little out of whack because the door opening is out of whack. I could plumb that, but I don't want to have super plumb and square door opening right next to some wonky outer walls. That's kind of going to highlight it more than anything, I think. So
Let's see if we can actually visually see this on camera when I back up here, because you can tell in real life.
what do you mean?
Which we've always sort of had a little laugh at your expense. I don't know, it doesn't look super obvious on camera,
No.
but kind of. I mean, well, I'm seeing it with these grids on the screen right now for filming purposes,
Yeah.
which the audience, of course, won't see. But it kind of just has that backwoods, old building, lots of character sort of feel.
Yeah, I wish it was more perfect, but it's not, and I'm going to go with it, make the best of it, see what I can do.
Very wise.
So thanks for joining me this week. Come back and see in future videos what this shed looks like when it actually looks pretty good. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, hit the notifications bell, subscribe, and check out the description box because it's got my website address in it, and I'd love to have you out for a visit.